Level 1, the tourist. You find the link in a YouTube comment that gets deleted by morning. Someone explaining how to download Tor, what .onion addresses are, why the dark web isn't what the news says it is. You follow the steps because the door is there, and you've always opened doors that other people walk past. The browser installs in minutes. The connection routes through relays in 3 countries before landing anywhere. Pages load slowly. Everything looks like the internet did in 2003. Ugly, functional, stripped of design. Forums with thousands of posts and no advertisements. Marketplaces with product listings and star ratings and customer reviews written with the same language people use to review kitchen appliances. You don't buy anything. You don't post anything. You read. The forums discuss things that don't get discussed on the surface web, how payment systems work at the infrastructure level, which government agencies monitor which protocols, which security assumptions civilians make that are wrong. The knowledge changes how you see everything above ground, your bank's login page, your phone's default settings, the privacy policy you never read on the app you use every day. You spend 3 weeks reading before you type a single word. Your first post is a question about Tor configuration. Basic. Obvious. The kind of question that marks you immediately as new. Someone responds with 2 words. Do research. Another person links a document you should have found yourself. Nobody is cruel, but nobody is kind either. The community has no interest in holding your hand. It has interest in people who figure things out and return to contribute something useful. You figure things out, you read the document, you read the documents, the document references, you read those documents until the concepts connect and the picture becomes clear. This place has its own logic, its own rules, its own hierarchy that functions without any central authority enforcing it. You want to understand that hierarchy. You start at the bottom. Everyone starts at the bottom. Level 2, the lurker. You stop being a tourist when you stop treating this as a destination and start treating it as a landscape you live in. The distinction is invisible from the outside, but total from the inside. Tourists consume. Lurkers learn. You build your setup with the patience the forums demand, not because the technical steps are hard, but because rushing produces mistakes, and mistakes here have consequences that mistakes elsewhere don't. A dedicated device purchased with cash, a live operating system that runs from a USB drive and leaves nothing on the hardware when powered down, a VPN through a provider with a verified no-log policy, paid in cryptocurrency through a wallet that doesn't connect to your name, Tor layered on top, the whole stack rebuilt from scratch after reading about how each component can fail. The forums teach you that most people who get caught didn't get caught through bad technology. They got caught through bad habits, using the same username in 2 places, accessing something personal from the same session as something sensitive, trusting someone who hadn't been verified, letting convenience override discipline in one small moment that unraveled everything built around it. You develop discipline before you develop anything else. You read for months. You map the landscape before moving through it. The marketplaces have their own economy with supply chains and pricing pressure and vendor competition. The forums have their own politics, respected voices and discredited ones, ongoing debates about security and trust, and which platforms have been compromised. The hacker boards have ongoing research, people working in public, sharing methods, documenting vulnerabilities, building tools that get shared freely because hoarded knowledge stagnates. You contribute nothing yet. You absorb everything. Your handle accumulates post count without accumulating attention. That's the correct ratio at this stage. The people who arrive wanting recognition before developing competence don't last. You're not here for recognition. You're here because this place knows things the rest of the world pretends don't exist. Level 3, the buyer. Your first purchase is small by design. Stolen credentials to a streaming service. $8 in Bitcoin sent through a mixer to a vendor with 400 positive reviews and a 2-year transaction history. The credentials work. You watch television on someone else's subscription and the account owner doesn't notice and probably never will. Nothing happened. This is what you tell yourself, and it's almost true. What actually happened is the threshold dropped. The first transaction proves the mechanics. The second is easier because the mechanics are proven. The third is easier still because the first two produced no consequences, and consequence is the only thing that makes thresholds feel real. You learn the marketplace culture quickly. Escrow holds payment until delivery is confirmed. PGP encryption wraps every message so the marketplace itself can't read the content of transactions it's facilitating. Vendor reputation is the only currency that matters more than money. A vendor with 1,000 clean transactions and a single exit scam is finished permanently. The reputation economy is more functional than most legitimate markets because the consequences of betrayal are immediate and have no legal remedy. You buy more. Credit card data that funds purchases you route carefully. Corporate login credentials you tell yourself you're buying to understand the market, not to use. Access to accounts you hold and don't touch, accumulating like inventory. The justifications stay one step ahead of the purchases. The banks cover fraud. The corporations have insurance. Nobody real is hurt by abstract numbers moving between systems. You repeat this until it sounds less like justification and more like fact. The people in the forums around you do the same. Everyone in the buyer tier maintains a private accounting where the harm is theoretical and the benefit is practical. The accounting works until something makes the theoretical concrete. You haven't reached that moment yet. You keep buying until you understand the supply side well enough to consider crossing to it. Level 4, the vendor. You become a vendor because a gap in the market is obvious and you have the skills to fill it. Someone posts a request for a specific type of corporate credential. The price offered is 10 times what you've spent on anything you've bought. You know how to get what they're asking for. The math resolves the hesitation. Your first listings are priced below market to generate reviews. Reviews are everything at the start. A vendor with no history is a liability. A vendor with 50 clean transactions is a known quantity worth paying a premium for. You build the reviews carefully, every product exactly as described. Every dispute resolved generously because the reputation cost of losing a dispute exceeds whatever the dispute was worth. The operational security tightens because now you have something worth protecting. Separate wallets for each transaction. Mixers between every inbound and outbound payment. Communication only through the marketplace's encrypted system, never through anything external. A persona built with enough internal consistency to withstand scrutiny, but no details that connect to anything real. The product line expands. Credential sets from breaches you aggregate and clean and verify. Access to specific platforms sourced through phishing campaigns targeted precisely enough to have high conversion rates. Corporate network access mapped and packaged and sold to buyers whose purposes you don't ask about because not asking is cleaner than knowing. The money accumulates in a form that can't be spent directly. You convert slowly, carefully, through methods that create distance from the origin. You live the same way you lived before, which is the correct strategy and also genuinely strange. You earn more than you've ever earned, and it changes nothing visible about your life. The separation between what you have and what you can show is its own discipline. A different kind of operational security that applies to the real world, the same way the technical discipline applies to the digital one. Level 5, the specialist. The marketplace model stops being sufficient. The listings are public. The reviews create a trail. The platform is a central point that can be seized, compromised, or quietly converted into a law enforcement operation running for months before anyone notices. You've read the case studies, markets running normally while administrators cooperate with investigators, vendors receiving packages with arrest warrants instead of products. The marketplace model has a ceiling, and the ceiling is the platform itself. You move off platform. Invitation-only forums, where entry requires vouching from 2 existing members who stake their own reputation on yours. Encrypted channels that leave no server records. Direct relationships with buyers who pay significantly more for reliability and access that doesn't come with marketplace risk. The business shifts from volume to precision, fewer transactions, larger value, clients who know exactly what they need and pay specifically for it. Your specialty develops from intersection of skill and market demand, corporate network access, initial footholds inside target organizations, reconnaissance packaged with access, not just credentials, but maps, privilege levels, lateral movement options, documented paths to the data the buyer wants. The work requires patience that the marketplace pace didn't develop. You spend weeks researching a target before touching it. The social engineering that produces initial access requires understanding the target's culture, communication style, vendors, software stack, internal terminology. You read everything public before constructing anything private. The phishing campaigns you run are indistinguishable from legitimate internal communications because you did the research that makes them indistinguishable. The click rates confirm the research paid off. Law enforcement is a constant variable in every calculation. You read the indictments when they're unsealed. You study how people got caught the same way a surgeon studies complications, not with relief that it wasn't you. With professional attention to the specific failure that made it possible, you adjust accordingly. The paranoia that feels excessive today is the preparation that feels exactly sufficient later. Level 6, the broker. The most valuable thing you have isn't technical skill anymore. It's the network. Years of clean transactions built relationships with people across the hierarchy, buyers who need specific access, suppliers who can provide it. The gap between them is where you live now. You become a broker because the margin in connecting people who need each other is larger than the margin in doing the work yourself. And because the exposure is smaller, you touch nothing directly. You know everyone peripherally. The work is communication. Encrypted messages moving between parties who don't know each other's identities, negotiating terms for transactions that involve real money and real legal exposure on every side except yours. You take a percentage from both directions. This is standard. The cost of an introduction that doesn't end in an arrest or an exit scam is worth 10% to anyone who's been burned by the alternative. The trust you've accumulated took years to build and can be destroyed in a single transaction. You've watched other brokers exit scam, disappear with escrowed funds, burn every relationship built over years for one large extraction. They made more in a week than in the previous year of honest brokerage. They also never worked in this space again. Some of them stopped working in any sense that continued to be relevant. The reputation destruction is total, and the consequences of total reputation destruction in this economy don't stay digital. You take no sides. You have no opinions about what buyers do with access you arranged. State-level actors, organized criminal groups, independent operators with unclear affiliations. Everyone needs introductions. Everyone pays. The neutrality is the product. The moment you have a preference about outcomes is the moment you become a participant instead of infrastructure. You stay infrastructure. The volume builds. The cryptocurrency accumulates. The network grows without requiring you to grow with it. Because like networks that work don't require maintenance, they require protection. Level 7, the administrator. You build the market because the markets you used kept failing, and building seemed more reliable than depending. The infrastructure takes 8 months before the first listing goes live. Servers distributed across 4 jurisdictions with independent administration. No single point the whole thing collapses through. Staff recruited through a vetting process that takes weeks and includes operational security tests designed to fail people who present well but practice carelessly. Escrow mechanisms audited before launch by people whose only assignment is breaking them. Dispute resolution protocols written with more precision than most legal contracts and enforced with more consistency than most courts. The launch is quiet. Invitation only. 50 vendors. Growth through referral only until the infrastructure proves stable under load. The marketplace earns a percentage of every transaction. At volume, that percentage becomes significant. At sustained volume across hundreds of vendors and thousands of buyers, it becomes the kind of money that requires serious thinking about how it moves and where it goes and what happens if the operation ends tomorrow versus in 3 years. The administration is consuming in ways the vendor and broker work weren't. Every decision has downstream consequences for people who depend on the platform functioning correctly. Security incidents require immediate response at any hour. Staff members whose loyalty is real until it isn't, and you have no way to know which side of that line anyone is on until it's already past mattering. You assume law enforcement has attempted infiltration. They always do with platforms at this scale. The operational security is designed around that assumption. Compartmentalization applied to everything. No one person, knowing enough to be the case that brings the whole structure down. The market runs for 2 years before the signs accumulate past ignoring. The decision to close is made before external pressure forces it. The infrastructure is destroyed. The funds are moved through channels prepared months in advance. The closure leaves nothing to seize and nobody to arrest because nothing officially existed. Level 8, the architect. You stop operating and start building the tools that operators use. The exit from administration created space and capital and the kind of perspective that only comes from having run something at scale and watched where it broke. The dark web's infrastructure has consistent failure points. Centralized markets that become targets. Communication channels that depend on platforms that can be seized, transaction systems that leave traces sophisticated enough to follow with sufficient resources. You design around these failures, not for any single operation, but as a general contribution to the ecosystem's resilience. Anonymization tools, decentralized marketplace protocols that have no central server to seize, because the market exists across thousands of nodes simultaneously. Communication systems built on cryptographic architecture that makes the content inaccessible without keys that only the participants hold. The work is technical and abstract and feels distant from the commerce and crime it enables. You tell yourself you're building infrastructure the same way a construction company builds roads without responsibility for what drives on them. The roads exist regardless, you're just making them better. The architect tier is small. The people operating at this level are known to each other through work rather than introduction. You recognize a tool's design philosophy before you know who built it. You know who built it before you ever communicate directly. When you do communicate, it's peer-to-peer, technical, specific. The personal details stay absent by habit. You release tools publicly under handles that rotate. The reputation accumulates to the work, not to any persistent identity. Law enforcement knows the tools exist. Understanding the tools and identifying the people who built them are different problems. You stay on the correct side of that distinction by keeping the identity thin and the work excellent. The tools spread through the ecosystem, updated by others, forked, improved, incorporated into operations you'll never know about. Your work outlives each specific version of it. Level 9, the cartel. The word cartel implies a structure more formal than what exists. It's a network. Loosely affiliated specialists who have worked together long enough to function as an organization without the liabilities of one. No hierarchy that can be mapped, no leadership that can be arrested and replaced to disrupt operations, no single point through which everything flows. You are a node in this network, which means you are both more powerful and more exposed than anything below this level. The operations at this tier don't resemble what happens lower in the hierarchy. No individual transactions, no marketplace listings, no single target intrusions sold to single buyers. The operations are coordinated, multi-stage, running across months, targeting infrastructure that affects millions of people simultaneously. Financial systems, healthcare networks, critical logistics, the access you helped develop, the tools you helped build, the relationships you brokered. applied at a scale where the consequences stop being abstract and become measurable in ways you'd rather not measure. You don't deploy the ransomware. You don't drain the accounts. You don't make the operational decisions that determine which targets get hit and how hard. You provide capability. Capability is neutral. This is what you tell yourself in the language that sounds most like fact. The arrests in the network happen to the visible members, the ones who communicated too often, the ones who spent money too quickly, the ones who trusted someone who was already flipped. You watch the indictments with the same professional attention you've always given them. The network adjusts, loses nodes and routes around the loss the way any distributed system routes around damage. You've been careful enough that your node stays dark to anyone looking from the outside. The paranoia that built through every level below this one is fully load-bearing now. Every precaution taken years ago is paying interest. You trust the system you built, mostly. The doubt doesn't disappear at the top. It gets heavier. Level 10, the ghost. The operation that ends your career begins as routine and reveals itself as a trap only after you're inside it. Honeypot infrastructure designed to look exactly like the targets you've spent years identifying. Law enforcement running the operation with the patience and technical sophistication that only activates when the target is worth the investment. You are worth the investment. The exit procedures execute without hesitation, because hesitation is what they're designed to eliminate. Hardware destroyed, keys burned, currency moved through sequences that took months to build and seconds to trigger. Every identity severed from every other identity in a cascade that leaves nothing correlated, nothing traceable, nothing that connects the person sitting in an ordinary apartment in an ordinary city to the network that 7 countries are currently dismantling. You watch the arrests from a distance measured in years of preparation. The indictments name people you worked with and operations you contributed to, describing them accurately in the broad strokes and completely wrong in the details that would have led to you. The firewall held, the work held, the discipline of every level below this one held in the moment it was tested. What's left isn't freedom exactly. It's a different kind of structure, a legitimate consulting practice built carefully from skills whose origin can't be mentioned. Clients who pay well to understand how systems fail because you spent years failing them. The work is the same work, with different paperwork and a different answer when someone asks how you know what you know. Some nights the accounting surfaces, the hospital systems locked during the week the capacity mattered most, the financial accounts drained from people who had already been losing, the infrastructure disrupted in ways that cascaded into consequences nobody planned and nobody measured. You provided capability. The capability was used. The distance you maintained between yourself and the use was functional and deliberate and doesn't actually exist in the accounting that happens in the dark at 3 a.m. You keep working. The work is useful now. The damage being prevented is real, even if the damage being compensated for is equally real and equally unaddressed. Somewhere a curious person just found a link in a comment section. The comment will be deleted by morning. The link will already have been followed. The cycle doesn't need you to continue. It just needed you while you were there.